So I don't remember this at all. Found it. In cherished memory of Berwick James Longman and John James Longman. And that's my grandfather and my dad. And my grandfather died in 1979, and then my dad in 1996. And they both took their own lives. And it's weird standing here and seeing, I'm named after both of them, Berwick James, John James, seeing my name on that grave.
My grandfather discovered he had bone cancer and sadly shot himself. When I was 9, my father, who had schizophrenia, set light to his flat and died. Now in my 20s, I myself get bouts of depression.
How do we inherit? Do we inherit mental health issues? I'd like to know.
So, is it in our genes? This is DNA, the genetic instructions each of us has, which store all our biological information. These strands are made up of about 20,000 genes. Genes are essentially codes which control the development of everything in our bodies. So how do they affect mental health?
I'm Catherine Lewis. I'm Professor of Statistical Genetics at King's College London. For mental health disorders, and actually most physical disorders, most of the diseases that are a real problem for us in society, a problem for the health service, are not about a single gene, but they're about a collection of genes.
And that collection so far includes at least 9 genes in which some changes are more common in people with depression, 20 in those with bipolar disorder, and 108 in people who have schizophrenia. So, what about a brother and sister? One has mental illness and one doesn't.
I'm Johnny. I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
I'm Lucy. I'm Johnny's twin sister and I am not bipolar.
When I have a bad episode, I'm not able to drag myself out of bed. There's lots of physical aspects of feeling what people are trying to call mentally unwell here. Okay, it's to do with your overall mood, which affects your whole body as well.
It's also when you
throw that in there.
You do see the world physically darker.
Mm.
It's a weird thing.
Yeah.
Colours are less bright somehow. It's a very strange thing to explain to people.
It's almost like all of your senses.
I'd like to talk about the diagnosis and what that meant for you, to hear that perhaps you had bipolar and you had something which your mother had.
Oh my goodness, there's so many different emotions and intellectual responses that you go through. At the time I cried with relief. I'm my mother's child, but I feel like my own condition is unique. And she's been diagnosed with bipolar and so have I. But I feel like they're not the same conditions. It's hard to explain because every mental health condition is unique to that person itself. A bit like our own personalities are all unique.
When people talk about genetics and mental health, they also talk a lot about the environment and people's upbringing. What's the relationship between your genes and the environment?
We know that all these disorders have both a genetic and an environmental contribution to the nature or nurture, and the balance of the importance of those varies across different diseases. It'll vary in individuals.
It seems having a parent with a mental illness can increase your risk of developing one too, through your genes and your environment. If you have a depressed parent, you're twice as likely to experience depression. With bipolar, you're 4 times more at risk, and in schizophrenia, which my dad had, it's 8 times.
So Tanya will stay outside the door and we'll...
Scientists are working on new ways of dealing with mental illness, ways that weren't available to my dad. I've been given unique access to a new brain training programme at King's College London. Doctors hope this new technique could stop people with depression like me from having repeated lows.
I'm Dr. Roland Zahn. I'm a senior clinical lecturer and consultant psychiatrist at King's College London. In the brain is where biology and psychology meet, because the brain changes in response to your learning experiences, and that's why the changes we've found in people with depression, I think they're reversible, because connectivity in the brain is a learning signal, so it should be possible to relearn that.
Scientists highlighted a specific emotion, guilt, because they say people at risk of depression often feel guilt more strongly than others. When they do, connections in their brain are overactive, much more than in people who don't have depression. The researchers therefore hope that training your brain to not feel guilt could help prevent depressive episodes. I've given the team some trigger words to make me feel guilty.
Shall we start?
That's something a lot of depressed people feel, including me, when we're low. As they appear on the screen in front of me, my brain reacts. I'm then told to think about forgiving myself, to try and think that reaction away.
So James has started his second training run, and we can see the thermometer going up again, because he seems to be doing very well in bringing down the level of connections between these regions, the connectivity.
So I've just had my results here at King's from the MRI scan that I had, and they just emailed it to me, and it says it's good news. They've established that the connectivity in my brain, as they would expect with someone with depression, was quite high before, but then they put me through the training and I was able to lower that connectivity, which means I was able to reduce the feeling of guilt. It's pretty amazing. They've managed to find a way to prove through science that feeling self-forgiveness can actually heal your brain.
I'm Anne Longman and I'm James's mother. When an episode comes on, the symptoms are obvious. And I remember you were present once, and you said to me, Mommy, Daddy's being horrible to me. Do you remember that?
How old was I then?
Oh dear, 5 maybe?
Because he was hearing voices.
He was hearing voices, and I remember he said, this goes for you, James, as well. So that frightened you. It is very frightening.
Him and me together, did that frighten you?
That did. And that's why our family life developed the way it did, because I felt my duty was to keep you safe.
Tell me about the day he died. What do you remember about the day that he died?
I remember receiving a phone call, and I just went into total shock, and then I burst into sobs and I couldn't stop sobbing. I felt I'd been a failure and I hadn't saved him.
Do you remember being at school and coming to tell me about it?
I do very much so. You were a lovely little boy in your sort of royal blue blazer, and you sat on my knee, and I can still see your little feet swinging. Oh, Mummy, why? And you were in shock, actually. You weren't crying, you were in shock. And I was told by matron that at night you would cry and punch the pillow saying, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy.
I didn't know that. I was 9.
You were 9. Yes, nearly 10, yes.
We both suffer with depression.
Yes.
Do you think that there's something in our family? Mental illness?
A lot, all the time, because there are many examples of it in his family. And maybe in mine, I don't know. The worry I had was that you would develop a psychotic illness like your father.
So when you look at Daddy and you look at me...
Yes. Sometimes your eyes are a bit of a giveaway, your look. I can see that you're troubled. But he would be very proud of you now, very, very proud, because you're doing all the things that he would never have been able to achieve.
So what have I learnt? Life experience and what we inherit from our parents both play an important role. The possibility of mental health illness can be passed on through the generations, but it's life events, and maybe sometimes just luck, that determines who's affected. And scientists are getting closer to figuring out how that works. I don't know what might happen in the future. I don't know if my kids will feel the way I do sometimes. But I know more about what my family's dealt with, and somehow I feel closer to my dad. I feel more positive. Mental health illness might run in my family, but the consequences don't have to.